Welcome to Different Visions, New Perspectives on Medieval Art, Issue 11, Introductions to the Middle Ages Through Medievalisms. I'm Dr. Brian Keane, and I'm joined by my co-editors to this special volume, Dr. Larissa Grollemund, Dr. Mariah Proctor-Tiffany, and our distinguished guest, Sir Tyler Gunther, the greedy peasant. Thank you so much, Tyler, for joining us today.
Yes, happy to be here. Thank you.
So, just to give everyone a little bit of an introduction to what we're doing here, we're so thrilled that Tyler has agreed to talk to us about his introduction to the medieval and medievalism and what he does on social media as the greedy peasant. So, this fits into our issue really, really well because we're really interested in the ways that people come to the medieval through pop culture, especially. And I think nowadays, especially through social media. So, thinking about the ways that the medieval is presented online and how people are consuming it and participating in it. Tyler, we're really excited to get your perspective on these kinds of topics since you are not a medievalist, correct?
That is correct.
So, just to get us started, how did you come to the medieval, or sort of why the medieval for you?
Right. I was thinking about this in preparations for this interview because there's a lot of different origins, but I think the beginning was like the Catholic church I grew up in Arkansas, was this Romanesque revival church that was like built at the end of the 1800s, and my like whole life centered around that space. And it is this like beautiful like medieval revival space, and so I just spent like thousands of hours in there staring at that artwork. And so I'm like, I guess that's where it began, because there wasn't like, I mean, other than like Disney pop culture, of course, but like staring at stained glass, staring at like all of the statuary, I think is what still informs like my love of the flamboyance for that time period. And what I thought was interesting was when I started Catholic school there, they started building like an extension to the church. So it was like 1990s architecture meets like beautiful Victorian Gothic revival architecture. And I think even in my little peasant brain, I was like, oh, this is terrible. Like we've lost everything of like, because it was just kind of like khaki and like carpets and wallpaper and like fluorescent lights. And I was like, oh, but all the good stuff's like over here in this like the detail and the storytelling and the visuals. So I think that like that's really like where it began. And then when it like popped up in my life moving forward, like medieval imagery, I could like I had those feelings baked in from a very early age of like appreciating them.
Great, thank you. So delighted that you're with us. I really love your combination of costume and the medieval and making it so fun, and love to show your stuff in our classes.
Amazing.
Tyler, tell us about how your medieval time traveling journey began. How did you start posting? Like, when did you realize, oh, this can all go on social media?
Yeah, I like went to school for costume design, which I think was also informed by like all the Catholic saint imagery I grew up with, because it is like all these different time periods and countries and national dress represented. And so after going to school for costume design, I was in this residency where we made 20-minute shows. And so I made one about King Edward II and Piers Gaveston and their like queer love story. And so I made the peasant outfit for that and then put it away. And then COVID happened. And my friend and boss, Robin Frohart, was like, you need to make a TikTok with that peasant costume. And I was like, I don't want to do that. Because TikTok was like very unknown. It was like very like I didn't know if I needed that energy in my life. And then because I was scared of it. And then she's like, well, you're fired if you don't, as a joke. And so then I made the TikTok and the rest is like history. So it was really, I needed that like push from my friend to do it, because it's like I had the costume. It's not like I made the costume for a TikTok, but she could see how these two could be combined into like an interesting art practice. And then now, like, here we are 4 years later. So
And 250,000 followers later.
yeah, it's like, because I was like, okay, fine, I'll do it. And like, I'll make 6 videos. And then if it doesn't work, we'll just never do this again. And so, yeah, funny that my instincts were completely wrong. That's a lesson.
Has the response to your persona online and the kinds of videos that you were initially posting, was that surprising to you? Were you sort of like,
Yeah, it was very surprising. Because at the beginning I was like, I had no followers. So I was like, I just have to make something that's funny to me. Like it, and I was like, and that was kind of the goal, was like, I think this is absurd and funny. It's kind of funny if it flops because it's just so niche that I never thought anyone would connect with it because it's like medieval reliquaries talking to each other. Like that wasn't following a trend that I saw happening necessarily. Um, so yeah, it was a huge surprise. And that I wasn't bringing a lot of like academic knowledge to it, that I was kind of like just bringing what I enjoyed. And I wasn't sure if that was enough. But that was, um, it was enough for some people, which is great.
I have to ask, how did you choose the reliquaries, or how did the reliquaries come to be such a central part of the videos that you initially got started with? So I think as medieval art historians, we love to see art used in that way,
Oh,
for it to
good.
come to life a little bit. I mean, we do, but definitely, if I'm speaking for the three of us. But it is niche, and it is sort of, they're one of
Yeah,
those things that you see in a museum or something, and they're very serious in a way, and to
yeah.
bring some fun and something sort of lighthearted to them. I'm curious how that got started for you.
Yeah, that was like one of the very first TikToks was making reliquary video because I was still too nervous to like put on a peasant costume and talk to no one. And so my friend was like, well, why don't you try like a filter? Because that will give you a little like deniability. And those reliquary busts at the cloisters have just like always been a favorite of mine. And when you see them in person, you just imagine them talking to each other because they have so much personality. And then when you learn that they also store like corpse chunks, you're just like, oh, oh, they do like literally have an inner life. Like they aren't just statues. They're so they were like the perfect inspiration of like they brought so much personality that I felt like just them making like very boring chit chat was still interesting to me because inside them is like a dead body part. And that was yeah, that was like at the very beginning.
I can't see them without thinking of them talking to each other now. So, I mean, there's something about reliquaries in general that I think has been animated for me by your content.
Oh,
And
good.
really sort of thinking about, yeah, like what would these things say to each other, or sort of what
Yeah.
would they say to us if they could talk? And I think that's like
Yeah.
ultimately what we're trying to do as art historians in some ways, is get objects to speak in some sense.
Yeah.
And so I'm so taken by the kind of popularity that the reliquaries have had, not just for medievalists and medieval art historians, which is a very niche group, but then the way that they've resonated with other people online who may not have any familiarity with the medieval.
Yeah.
Has the response from people who maybe didn't know about that background or that art been surprising in some way to you, or different than what you expected?
I think so. Yeah, it's like, well, I find it's interesting with like practicing Catholics, like who I know. It's like they're like it's such a Catholic thing, these reliquaries, but it's not like they didn't really teach us about them in Catholic school. So there's all these like really Catholic things that they're kind of like, that's a lot to take in. We'll let you discover that later. Because you think after like 13 years of Catholic school, you would have like you would have known a lot about reliquaries. But there are these like pockets of that faith that can like still surprise someone in like their 50s and 60s where they're like, wait, what? What is in there? And this is someone who's like at church every day or every week. And so I find that fascinating. Not good or bad, but just that um it's a fascinating history of that faith and that some of it's like really, really grotesque, of course, and beautiful at the same time. And that's been the surprise where I'm like talking to people who are like, wait, they're what? And it's like, no, this is a part of your whole thing, right? And so, I mean, I'm talking about family members where, um, yeah, I think that's interesting. The like attraction and repulsion from those elements of it.
And it's so interesting, as Larissa was saying, you've taught so many medievalists, I think, a lot about the Middle Ages as well, in terms of the way you've animated these objects. I mean, helping us to think about objects differently, think about how we curate the objects in these spaces, how we, engage the material with our visitors. And so, I mean, even when you mentioned Edward II and Piers Gaveston, I just keep thinking of my first introduction to their love story was through Derek Jarman. And I think for some people,
Right,
maybe you've given a similar kind of introduction with
right.
some really nuanced and thoughtful videos. Every time you post, I'm like, that's so brilliant because you've enlivened an aspect of medieval history or art or culture that we see in scholarship on black and white and in print, but you've really animated it quite literally, but also with real heart and hoping, as you said, that people think again about their own upbringing, religion, or culture. Especially in the U.S., we're so far from that. So just a few
Right.
thoughts that went through my mind. But I'm curious if you had advice for others who might be thinking about how to get started on their own
Hmm.
sort of medievalism journey, reflecting on your own sort of hesitancy to start.
Yeah,
Larissa is, of course, one of the other great Instagram and social media personalities for medieval. So, what advice do
yes.
you have for those out there hesitating to get started?
Yeah, I think I had two thoughts about this. The first one was like me acknowledging like that it wasn't just like obvious to me at the beginning. Like there was so much like baggage tied up with like Catholic art and my experience being a queer person growing up in a Catholic church that it wasn't something I was ready to just like jump into and make a career about. I like felt that maybe there was just a lot of triggering or whatever for those spaces and thinking like you needed to fully believe in that faith to engage with that art. Like that was the ticket to enjoy that art was to have that faith. But then, of course, you get older and you realize, like, I can approach this for the craftsmanship and for the beauty and the absurdity and the humor, and that you're not doing it from a disrespectful point of view. You're not doing it to make fun of it. Because it felt like it was one or the other. Either you like believed in it 100% or you were making fun of it. But then, of course, it's like, no, there's the art history perspective where you're just like you're learning about the people who made them, you're learning about how they made them, and there was like so much joy in like finding that permission for myself of like, oh, I can just enjoy it as art. And like as so many people already knew, it just took me a while to get there because I just thought there was like uh this like gatekeeping that wasn't really existing. Like I was kind of like had that in my mind. But I just wanted to say that because sometimes it's, yeah, people are like, they don't want to go in Gothic revival churches because they're like, that gives me bad feelings. And that's fair. But for me, I could trick myself eventually to be like, no, like I can go and just like love that stained glass and respectfully and really enjoy that. So that was one thing. And the other thing was like the gender of it all, where for me, it was like looking at the masculinity and the way it's presented in the Middle Ages. It's like, I still find so exciting that it's like, because I grew up with this very narrow, like 1990s Arkansas version of what a man is, and anything flamboyant or colorful was like negative. But those men still think of like the Middle Ages men as like real pinnacles of manhood. And so seeing those men in their fabulous dress and realizing like, oh, this is all just like contrived was like also a nice discovery of like masculinity is very fragile, as we all know. And just like um the Middle Ages kind of like is a great example of that as far as like how like fashions change, whims change, what makes a man changes. And so all the pressure I put on myself growing up was kind of like could go away when I'm like, oh, like I'm dressing as absolutely a man just in like 1444. And so, fight me. What's been interesting is like having that historical basis to pull from. Because it feels like in your book that you sent me, The Fantasy of the Middle Ages, like it's great to see other artists taking inspiration. It's like, oh, it's not my solitary journey. It's like, oh, so many people are inspired by this time period, of course. But yeah, no, but there is like some roadblocks at the beginning. It's like not always obvious um, that it's going to how you're going to connect with it. So I think that's my long-winded answer.
Could you talk a little bit more about like the creation of a real life community around the Greedy Peasant account and some of the pride events that you've done and kind of it's like mobilizing medievalizing spaces too, but to create something that happens off social media and actually in real life. Could you talk about some of those events and maybe, yeah, the kinds of things that you're hoping to achieve with those sorts of events?
Right. I mean, the community that's formed around it is like the most incredible thing because it's kind of happening outside of me. Like it's really me and this green screen, um, making most of it. But then it's like the engagement is so wonderful. And like the tone that I was like trying to set at the beginning has been totally improved by the community. Like everyone seems to like there's not a lot of negativity. Like the internet is a really dark place, but the Greedy Peasant community people are finding such like ways to enjoy the work in such positive ways, in such humorous ways that I'm constantly trying to remember like how lucky I am that it's because the internet can go a lot of different ways. And being a peasant could be interpreted a lot of different ways. But no, it's been thrilling. And then to get to do live events, like our Pride Eve event, which we did last year, and we're doing again this year, was the ultimate manifestation of like people coming, being together, not knowing each other. Um, sorry, there's a siren, but we're really and encouraging them to really like dress up and really like push the boundaries of how they would normally dress and kind of like creating an environment where like you can take that risk because everyone there will be like supportive of you and be encouraging you, and it's like exciting to me that there is a community in which like I'm not a very like fashion risk taker in my day-to-day life, but I'm like, well, for Pride Eve though, I can really dress up. And I think that's a feeling other people are feeling, which makes me very happy because in our modern day-to-day, like we don't really have a lot of reasons to like experiment with how we present ourselves. And the way that I thought growing up, like there'd be a lot more like masquerade balls in my life and just like really like glamorous events to attend. And so it's fun to get to like
Met
make,
Gala next year.
yeah, next year. I know. I was like, oh, surely I'll just be like swatting away those types of events. But then you're like, oh, I really have to wait for the next wedding to like dress up. But this Pride Eve event's the ultimate like um queer community embracing, and like being at the cathedral is great because it's kind of like just match the energy of that space. Like it's a huge, flamboyant, beautiful space. Like dress accordingly. Like the Gothic architecture lends itself to like um the biggest manifestation of an outfit you want. So that's exciting that you're not going to look out of place in a Gothic cathedral wearing the most fabulous outfit. Where sometimes you don't make that connection because you think you need to dress like conservatively in a church, but it's like it can take it. So
Yeah.
yeah.
In some ways, it's sort of lovely because it intersects with the kind of ethos of a Renaissance fair or another sort of period space that allows for some experimentation and freedom of expression and dress. And I think it's cool to see that happening in other kinds of spaces that are not quite
Yeah.
as themed, maybe. But I love
Oh,
the idea of the church architecture like calling for that kind of that kind of response.
oh. Because when I think of like church clothes growing up was like your most boring khaki pants and button-down shirt. But then it's like, oh, but the space really is asking for more. Like,
Mhm.
and you think of like big church hats, which my Arkansas Catholics did not wear, but like there is such a dressing for the occasion is something I'd like to that we are embracing, which is great.
And the celebrants that in the whole liturgy can be quite flamboyant as well with their full
Oh
flowing
yeah.
vestments. And I mean, that's to me another big draw is watching the whole celebration of moving objects, candles and
Yeah.
books and the
Absolutely.
elements. It's so
Oh,
pageant
totally.
like, right?
Yeah, that's where, as an former altar server, of course, I'm like, oh, we did go from altar server to theater degree pretty quickly. And sometimes it's like those are completely separate parts of my life, and it's like, well, a lot of overlap.
And there are other
Um,
medievalists who will be listening to this that also have a fascination with vestments and are themselves celebrants in real life, or that, in our conferences, we attend the medieval dance, not always in regalia or costume,
yeah.
but there's jousts at other medieval conferences and
Oh, I love that.
hands-on, activities to make astrolabes or pewter pilgrim patches. So we're also sort of
Oh,
experimenting in our own spaces, but it doesn't always translate in the day-to-day life.
yeah, yeah. And I like that at this event, it's not, you don't have to dress accurately. Like nobody's holding up a medieval rubric to your outfit. So some people were like 1960s vintage, some people wore medieval, some people wore like futuristic utopian, but it all seemed to work together, which you just don't know until you see it. But I was just thrilled that someone in a peasant costume looked great next to someone in a completely different interpretation of that prompt. Because yeah, I just people, they're like, well, maybe this isn't historically accurate and I'll be laughed at, but it's great to find spaces where it's like, no, like if you can go 100% historically accurate and everyone's on on your side and you can just do like your version of it and everyone's there with you too. So exactly. These like moments where you get to try out different visuals is exciting.
Can I ask about your Saint Snap system, how that came about? I just love it is so medieval. And yes, there you are, you've got the hat. Um, just how you use snaps on costumes to make it so interchangeable. And I really like even the unadorned snaps. They evoke male, metal
Yeah.
on clothing. And it's almost like ASMR as you click them on
Yeah.
in your videos. I love that. And just the idea of reusing textiles is so medieval.
Right, right.
Never throw away anything.
Yeah, that's where, because I kept wondering, like, why don't we dress with more embellishment, more flamboyance? Because we do have access to more materials than they did in the Middle Ages. But I came down to like laundry was the culprit because it's like we don't want anything that can't be like thrown into a washer dryer, myself included. So it really was like how do you create like super embellished, interesting garments that are also washable? Because it's like I don't go to the dry cleaners. Um, so it's like really removing the barrier of like how do you make this so accessible? And that was how we got into these snaps that the snaps are very washable, so all the decorations can be taken off and removed and exchanged. But yeah, that was really that and also like the pace of social media, where I was following other fashion accounts and it seemed like they were making a different costume every week. And I was like, I just don't understand it. So it's like, and I don't really enjoy the first 99% of making a costume. I like the embellishment. So it was also like, okay, let's make one base and I'll hot glue stuff until the end of time. But so as those kind of like things combined, where I don't think I would have developed any of that without this like social media um, context. But it's been really exciting. And I think like not to turn this into me asking this question, but it's like in medieval times, they must have, like you're saying, reused materials in a way.
Absolutely.
Not that they were using snaps, but I'm like, there is something to like, they wouldn't cover something in jewels and then put that in a closet for 5 years.
Yeah, you reuse everything. You
Yeah.
never throw away anything. If a textile wears out, you reuse it, you cut it
Yeah.
down, you give it to the church. It has 15 lives. So,
Right, right. Which is why not a
um,
lot of it exists, which is like sad for research, but it also is like exciting within this like way of making costumes of like, oh yeah, things aren't single use. Things can just keep changing. So yeah.
well, thank you so much. Tell us why the Middle Ages are the best, according to you, Tyler.
Oh yeah. Well, this changes like every day. But my answer today is like I think it's this, to me it's the saints because I'm kind of obsessed with like medieval saints and how they created all of these reasons to celebrate all these different interesting feast days and artworks and recipes and I think that's like uniquely medieval to me and in our like I've been thinking a lot about like holidays and celebration and how everything's become very like corporate and under capitalism, we've like created these new rules of how we're supposed to celebrate holidays. But I'm like, I'm really attracted to these like niche, interesting patron saints for like pharmaceutical reps and just like them having their own holiday and their own like recipe to make on that holiday and their own thing to tie to a tree. And to me, that feels like this like interesting medieval outlook on life. Um, so I don't know if that's the most cohesive answer, but that's where my brain is. It's like they kind of give you permission to be like, to make these like interesting decisions that other time periods I think don't lend itself to. Whereas you're like, it was the Middle Ages, and people will go, oh, okay, yeah.
Looking
So that's
forward, I mean, knowing that like that social media is always hungry for new content and kind of new things.
yes.
What do you see as, if you could give us maybe a little sneak peek into the future of what you see Greedy Peasant doing? Will you continue doing some of your favorite things? Will you introduce new series, new kinds of things? What do you hope for the account going forward?
Well, I think it's like a continuation of this like holiday thing is where my brain is. It's like
Mhm.
trying to like carve out moments in time for yourself as the world is kind of like doing what it's doing, that like looking back in time to be like, here's a little holiday for you. Here's like a little morsel of happiness that capitalism hasn't gotten its hands on. Is something I would like to explore more in the future through because like holidays are the best. Like that's what I loved growing up, was getting to like decorate and celebrate. And there's that like meme that goes around that like peasants had like, 3,000 more holidays than we did, which isn't like totally accurate, but there is that impulse of but I'd like to do more research along those lines of like
Mhm.
finding these traditions that people made to make themselves happy and to celebrate that we've kind of lost over time, especially like in America, that those traditions haven't survived. Um, because I think within the social media hamster wheel, I was like, I need to stick to the liturgical calendar. Like I kept going on these different tangents, and it's like, you missed Easter. Like Easter is big for us. Like Palm Sunday is big. So I'm hoping to do more research along those lines of like, what were people actually doing on, July 12th? Is there a feast day I can talk about? So, um, yeah, that's me trying to create a framework for this very like zigzaggy kind of like career on social media.
July 12th is the Feast of Saint Veronica. There's a lot you can do with
Oh,
textiles there. So much. But I don't know. I mean, Tyler, Larissa, we had this idea ages ago at the Getty that, we would read a book of hours every 3 hours or something to try to get in this
oh,
medieval spirit, or like open up a choir book and just listen to choral music, because every 3 hours you need a break. You need to hear some uplifting reading or hear some great music. And I mean, it
yeah,
would be fun to do a kind of day in the life of a medieval greedy peasant, just
yeah,
here I am at the early morning hours reading my book of
yeah.
hours and then visiting
It's
my
St.
It really
Veronica's
reliquaries.
Day.
was only prevented from doing that by the fact that I would have to wake up in the middle of the night to pray.
Exactly.
Yeah,
I
it's a
couldn't
great
do it.
break from other things, but not from sleep.
Not from
Yeah.
sleep. Yeah.
Well, the good news is there's a feast day every day, so there's always something to celebrate, always something to think about. I mean, I find that that's so interesting because people are constantly online and sort of constantly on social media, and it is a little bit of a medieval impulse to be kind of celebrating and engaging with that on such a regular basis and sort of on such a
Yeah.
scheduled basis almost, that I think you're
Right.
Like
channeling
sewing a
something.
thread, like
Yeah, I
sewing
know.
a thread through cloth, making a stitch, stitch, stitch.
Yeah, and it's been nice, like, because I didn't know how long this would all last. So to already get to return to some things like Palm Sunday now, like 4 times, has been interesting. Like, and that you think social media has to be new every single post, but people actually are craving a little bit of like, oh, on Palm Sunday, we that medieval peasant posts the same video. And it's really sweet to now be a part of a tradition. But yeah, exactly. That kind of like medieval impulse that we all have.
Yeah.
Well, we're so
Do you guys
grateful
have
that you've
any other?
spent time with us. Yeah, I mean, we could talk probably for hours, I know, but
Sure.
so amazing that you've given us your time. And I do hope at some point, you're able to continue to venture beyond medieval New York. And,
Yes.
there are so many other medievalists who are looking at medieval Baltimore, and we're looking
Yeah.
collectively at medieval California. So you were
Yes.
already ahead of a curve in what, academics are doing. So you're
Mm.
totally on a path that feels parallel, but also so much more adventurous and exciting on every day. So thank you eternally from the bottom of my heart, from our
Mhm.
hearts, for spending time with us.
Oh, I appreciate this so much. So, I'm glad it all worked out. And I'm excited to read the other articles in this issue because it really will help me as I'm navigating things. So yeah, thank you.
So
Thank
nice
you.
to meet you.
Thank you so
Yes.
much.
Yes, nice to meet you all.